All right. Hello everyone. Welcome to our APAM our APAM, and where we will be discussing a large, broad amount of topic regarding or centering around queer APIDA identity and just the intersectionality layers of it. We will start by introducing ourselves. My name is Kyle Huang. My pronouns are he, they. I go to University of Minnesota Twin Cities, and I am one of the co-advocacy chair for ECC this year. Would anyone like to go next?
I'll go next. So my name is Sam. I go by pronouns he, him. I am from The Ohio State University, and I am the Technical Networking Chair.
My name is Jane Alliston. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I attend the University of Missouri Columbia, and I am the co-public relations chair. Yeah.
Awesome. So this week, we for our queer APIDA or topic around those identities, we want to focus a little bit more about like just some stereotypes against queer Asian American and Pacific Islanders. And for this week specifically, we read an article or a blog by the Impact Program. It's like essentially the LGBT Health and Development Program by the Northwestern University. They published a blog called Stereotypes Against Queer Asian American and Pacific Islanders, where they talked about expectations of femininity within queer APIDA community, men and women, and how Asians are also fetishized at the same time. So yeah, for the first set of questions that we have, we talk, or I'll just ask, what stereotypes are pitted against people with APIDA and queer intersectionalities, and how are they harmful? Open floor.
I'll start. Okay, so I'm gonna try to unpack this a little bit by going like intersectionality by intersectionality, essentially. So when I think of like APIDA oppressions is like, as at least in a sexual context, I think of like the idea that Asian women are exotic, they're beautiful, they're erotic, they're sexual objects. And then for men, I think of Asian men are usually looked at more as like feminine. So like it's the stereotype that they're shorter, they're smaller, they have smaller penises, like all those stereotypes that are not true, obviously, because they're stereotypes. But also just like that are really damaging to like their to them. Is a good way to put it, I think. And then I think of like the first thing I think of like for queer intersectionality is just like the idea that like they're usually more femme and like more are more like feminine in expression in a sense is like the thing that I think of. So then like when you combine like especially for APIDA men, I guess like when you combine those two intersectionalities, it's just like a combination of like super feminine like man that's like undesired in a sense. Yes.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think it's very hard to just express your gender identity in general as an APIDA member, because specifically for APIDA, you're kind of boxed into these stereotypes, just as Jane was talking about. How, I mean, personally for me, like I identify as a man, and I'm already boxed into this, feminine personality that I don't necessarily abide by, and so right off the bat, it's really hard to express any uniqueness in your gender identity when you're already put into a box.
Yeah, I agree. but also I just kind of realized this on the spot, but just like a preface for our audience, APIDA, APIDA would stand for Asian Pacific Islander Desi American. But back to what Sam said, I very much relate. I also personally like have experiences where I would just kind of get boxed into this corner that I didn't really ask for. And so it always feels very unfair and very upsetting that, or it feels like you don't have control. Yeah, I guess that's like, that can be like more of a harmful effect, like feeling like you don't have a control over how society kind of dictates you. And yeah, and also like to Jane, like it I never really thought of it like that, like it, or through like an intersectionality lens. Like I understand like for queer men, we're often seen as feminine, and for APIDA, it often seen as feminine. But I never saw it through a lens of intersectionality, where like I knew both of those things were seen as more feminine, but I never saw it as like wow, this is like a big layer combined together, and it's like it's truly shown up in every single like aspect of my life. Like go to um I go to queer community for like dating or something, and then I'm seen as feminine because I'm Asian. And then I go to Asian spaces or APIDA spaces, and then I still get seen as feminine, but not because not because I'm Asian. Like they don't see I'm feminine because I'm Asian. They see I'm feminine because I'm queer. And so it puts me in this position where I'm feminine anywhere. And not to say that's bad, but it's definitely feel like I don't have control over what I have to offer. But yes.
Thank you for sharing your experience, Kyle. I guess like in a sense that kind of like leads into the next question of like, so in a sense, like in the queer community, like why are Asians seen as less? I don't know. I'm gonna break this question up into three, so you know. But
one short answer. That why in queer community, why are Asian less than racism?
that is the short answer.
That is a very short answer.
I want to say, okay, someone correct me if I'm wrong. I probably am, but I want to say, so like, it was like the root of what is it, like the Asian feminine, like that ideal was like, I want to say it was like after like the Chinese people like immigrated to the US and they were building the railroads across the country, and like they were the ones that were being forced to do like the low wage. And then they were also like, but at the same time, like obviously like they have their sexual desires. They were like meeting with women, or like they were meeting with men, like they were basically like doing all of that. And then like white people were like, this can't be, kind of thing. And so they started saying that like Asian men are less than Asian men, like why would, like, to white people, like why would you want to sleep with them because they're Asian, kind of thing. And then like that's the root of the stereotype, I want to say. Yes. It doesn't mean it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's like these stereotypes just got transcended from colonialism as again. It just transcended all the way since then. And or I guess like, yeah, definitely colonialism. But it just got transcended, and now we're just stuck in this narrative that we can't get out of. Yeah, it's definitely unfair.
So then we can go to the next question. Why does being feminine equate to being less than? And I'm gonna copy Kyle here. The short answer is misogyny. But
Yeah, I definitely think that plays a role, and it's such a big misogyny is such a big system, and I see it ingrained very much still within like, and I'm speaking from my own experience, queer APIDA men, queer APIDA men's community, because I think like even though society sees them as more feminine, and they might even identify themselves as more feminine, they also make very I see from time to time like queer PETA men making misogynistic remarks as a joke, and it's very sad. Like misogyny runs very deep as a system. Yeah.
I kind of want to pose a question of my own. Going off of that, why do you think misogyny exists? Like, why do you think that came to be? I have my own thoughts, but I want to hear other people's thoughts first.
see, I said this earlier too, but I was like, who, excuse my language, who the
Masu
thought that it was okay to disrespect their mother, you know? And so I'm just like, why does misogyny exist? Like, why can't gender equality just be a thing? Like, why can't I be the same as any other man on the streets, you know? But I'm not. I don't know. That's my answer to that.
I just wanted to say, so like, I think it kind of, the root of misogyny is kind of similar to racism in that I think the reason that both of those things are even exist is because someone sees that someone else is better than them, and people naturally want to be on top of the food chain. That's just a general idea. Everyone kind of subconsciously wants to be the best, and I think specifically with regards to misogyny, a lot of times in the past, when women were shunned or put quote unquote in their place, it was because they were actually achieving and doing more things than men were at the time. And you can look at a lot of, famous women in history who have done amazing things, and they're often shunned for it and kind of rebuked for that, because people like to feel in control. People like to feel on top of things. And so when someone else is better than them, it's hard to not break your break your mindset and kind of just go against that, even if somebody deserves that praise or somebody deserves that. And so I think specifically with regards to the queer community, I think there is a lot of discrimination towards this community because they have something that other people don't. And I think that's understanding their gender identity, because a lot of people don't understand who they are. A lot of people don't know. They can't answer that question. If someone asks you, like, who are you? It's really hard to answer that. I even have trouble answering that myself. And so I think because someone has such a strong, like someone who's in the queer community has such a strong like identity, and they can say like, this is who I am, I know who I am, people become jealous of that, and then they try to put someone else down because they want to feel in control. They want to feel on top. But that's kind of my thoughts behind like why racism even exists in the first place, or why misogyny exists in the first place. It's because people don't like the idea of someone being better than them. People don't like the idea of not being in control of their lives, and it just kind of grows and builds from there.
That's an interesting thought. I guess like it makes sense. Like you think of like people are just really competitive, and like they have a lot of pride and stubbornness that like wants them to always be the best and wants them to always be on top. And it makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it personally reminds me of like I never really understood these kind of stereotypes or references, but I would go on social media, aka TikTok, and I would see like a lot of these things or clips where it's like, oh, are you homophobic? You must be a gay person yourself. And I never really understood that, like that joke. But like what you said made like a lot of sense, Sam. Perhaps it's more like anger that you're not in control, and then that's like a projection on someone else. And I think that's like a very interesting thought too. Um, yeah, yeah. I don't know, but I also want to say, you also brought up like, or actually, let me process this real quick. I can't make sense yet on that real quick.
We're gonna Kyle some processing time. um, yeah. Oh, I guess like
I
I
mean,
don't
it's
know.
not.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if it's not too much to like think about, we could move on to another question and then come back to this discussion. Unless
Yeah.
you had something to say, Jane.
I almost wanted to pose another question. I'm not very good at wording these on the spot, but Kyle brought up like TikTok, and like I don't personally watch TikTok, so I'm not very familiar with this. But there's like the trend of like what is it, like heterosexual cisgendered men like basically like trying to almost like make it trendy to like be more feminine in a sense. And I almost wanted to ask, like, what are y'all's thoughts on that? Because, like, obviously, as a lot of them, the majority are white, cisgendered, heterosexual men who come at a place of privilege, right? And then they're making it trendy. Thoughts?
To be honest, I've heard like, I don't know how I feel about that. Like on one hand, anyone should be able to express freely as they want to. But on the other hand, I know like I for sure know these white straight cis boys are just not genuine in how they express, or at least it makes me feel like they're not genuine. It feels like a mockery. Um, there's a term for it. It's called queerbaiting. And so they like pretend to be cool, or they act queer and they pretend to be queer. And yeah, I honestly am still very new to it. I don't know how I feel about it because it's very conflicting. Like on one hand, like are they genuinely expressing themselves like that? On the other hand, it's like I know you're not. Like but it's also like not for me to say, because who knows? We don't know what we don't know. But yeah.
Yeah, so I'm in like this women's and gender study class on campus. I love it so much. We're talking about toxic masculinity. Like, that's the class. Regardless, they brought up the TikTok conversation and they were like, I think it's problematic because a lot of times at the end of the video, they always bring in their girlfriend and like kind of show off that it's okay, like their girlfriend. And I'm just like, I feel like this isn't okay. But yeah, I wanted to hear another
So
opinion.
maybe I'm a bit naive, but I actually don't know what you're talking about. Like, could you kind of explain like what you mean? Because I don't watch TikTok at all either. I'm kind of in the dark here.
Yeah, okay, so this is like I should probably actually look this up before like I talk more about it. I've never actually watched the TikToks, but I guess it's like they're wearing dresses, wearing skirts, or like painting their nails and like showing it off and like be like, look, I look cute kind of thing. But then afterwards they're like, oh, my girlfriend did my makeup kind of thing. And so like these are just very feminine expressions. I don't know. And it's like trendy now. Like they're doing it to get the likes or the follows. Kyle, do you have a better description of it?
Yeah, I think we have like a slight discord on what we're talking about. So I think what you're saying in what you like in terms of like painting nails or doing makeups like for hetero cis men, I think that's fine. Uh, because I do know like some people who came forward and like genuinely say that I'm even though I'm a hetero cis straight male, I genuinely do want to try makeup and nails and all of that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But like I think the TikToks that I'm talking about are like um, already popular TikTok stars, um, uh, straight white cis het boy, um, who always act manly and tough historically, and yeah, they always act tough historically, and all of a sudden, one of the TikToks they make during Pride Month, let's say, they would like do like really feminine pose, like and it feels like mockery. Like I don't want to. I'm not comfortable recreating it, but like I feel like it's one of the things I will try to look up and show you. But it feels like they're mocking. Like it feels um like like this one thing like if someone does this, it's like, oh, they're queer. Like they kind of do something like that. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like it's the gestures that is not natural, that is supposed to be feminine and supposedly something that queer people have. If I'm making sense, let me see if I can find it.
So I think I understand a little bit more about what you're talking about, and I think I hate to like reiterate my point, but I think this is kind of like this kind of goes back to what I was saying about how like when someone has something that you don't, you you kind of feel like you're not in control and you need to have that control. Um, and the same thing, like if your friend had, something that you don't, you would want that thing as well. And so it's, I mean, I think especially in like any other cultures, you'll see Caucasian, heterosexual white men steal a lot of things, a lot of pieces from other cultures because other people are proud of their culture, and at least in America, people want to feel that same sort of like proudness, or that they kind of want to claim that thing as their own because they want that as well. And so specifically with regarding to like the TikToks, like I could see how, like that is, if someone like makes certain feminine poses, or they do certain feminine things such as makeup or nails, like um those are like you explicitly stating that you're proud of who you are. And I guess like specifically with regards to like nails and makeup, like those are signs that like you're proud of like what you look like, and you want to like show off that sort of thing. And I think a lot of guys, I mean, not necessarily even just like heterosexual guys, but a lot of guys don't really have that because it's not. I mean, this is a whole nother problem in itself, but like it's not very socially accepted for guys to be able to like flaunt their appearance with like makeup or nails, and so like we feel the need to want to do those sorts of things.
Yeah, for sure. Now that you kind of brought that up, I kind of see it. I kind of see it like as a level of steps too. Like socially, definitely not universally, but like socially, women generally gets accepted first. Not for the lack of a better word, women generally gets accepted first to wear makeup, and then it comes down to gay men, and then heterosexual men or straight men would be expected to be the last out of everyone to wear makeup. So yeah, I definitely that makes sense. Like it's like a step. Like you kind of want what you don't have. Yeah. Mm.
Makes sense. I was
Yeah.
gonna ask any other questions y'all have or like topics to talk about.
I want to ask this one last question, and it's probably not going to lead anywhere like last time, but why are queer Asians people like sexualized, but then they still face like so many different types of like rejection because they're queer and Asian?
I don't know why, but I want to touch on like so like in the blog they had like a YouTube video talking about like Grindr and how like a lot of times in bios like they would put like no Asians, no Asian men or whatever. And then like you always like hear about studies that like what is it? It's like it's swipe ratings like on Tinder, and like Asian women are always at like the top of the rating, and then like Asian men are always at the bottom kind of thing. And like I don't know how this relates back to the question, but that was like something that I thought of when you were talking about it, because I think that's what we talked about last time. Yeah. I want to say like the idea of like Asians in general are very like exoticized, and we're very like looked at as like erotic and rare and special or whatever. But then when it comes down to like actually going through with like a sexual act, it's like not okay almost, because they're like men or because they're queer, and it doesn't make sense. I guess it's kind of like my thought process there.
Yeah, and I also mentioned this last time, but like it frustrates me. It's like to see that within within queer community, like Asian men are definitely still like before it's still seen as less than, but recently I want to say like rise of K-pop boy bands, um, it it almost like makes it like starting to become okay now to like fetishize Asian men more within queer men community. Um, so yeah, it's frustrating. It's before you treat us like trash, like you wouldn't accept us, and now we're just kind of this thing, this object that you kind of want. But at the end of the day, you still see us as object.
Yeah, it's still dehumanizing. Yeah, K-pop is kind of problematic. Their industry is based on, the men being very feminine, and like that's their play, and like it reiterates a lot of gender stereotypes, I think. But fetishization is also not okay. That's kind of the point I want to make with that.
I kind of had this thought. This was like something Sam mentioned like a long time ago. Like remember when I was processing, but it finally came. But like you brought up like I don't know, like the way you brought up misogyny. I forgot how you brought it up, but it kind of reminds me of like this one thing. Like I don't know about y'all's schools, but at my school we have like a women, gender, and sexuality studies. I always wondered why they were all grouped together. Um, and then this conversation hits me like it's about studies of those identities, but it's also the study about femininity, of how that is shared and how um, navigating your own gender and navigating your own sexuality equates to somewhat equates to femininity, and therefore I don't know what therefore is, but like it just I just see like misogyny plays a deeply rooted within gender and sexuality as well.
I guess like you were saying that, and I was thinking, like the top tier, like the most privileged person is the white cisgendered heterosexual man, right? And like when you steer away from masculinity or away from, like being straight, like it takes into account like it's like literally like women's and gender studies, like when you're talking about it, it's like all the things that are like oppress. Like you're actually talking about oppression, I guess. Like, oh, I think it's interesting that like a lot of times when I'm taking my women's and gender study classes, like that's where I also learn a lot about like racism, and it adds more depth to like my prior knowledge too. It's just like I see it more as like a class about oppression rather than a class about like women and gender. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that is what I was trying to verbalize, but you did it way better than me. So yeah. So what do we think are some takeaways? Just to kind of slight recap. Like, what are some takeaways that y'all have like from this discussion?
I want to do like little bullet points. Bullet point number 1 is the APIDA stereotypes and the queer stereotype, like intersectionalities, I guess, like that we talked about at the beginning. So like, yeah.
I think for me, we haven't we definitely did not dive deep in this yet, but like definitely my takeaway would be like how women, gender, and sexuality, that they're very interconnected. I can't verbalize it yet, but like they're very interconnected and I can sense it. But yeah.
Man, Sam really just hit the nail with the misogyny description for Kyle. Kyle needed processing time, and then he wanted to come back and second bullet point, y'all. Beautiful. I want to say those are like the. Oh, go ahead.
No, you can finish with what you were saying.
Oh, I want to say like those are the 2 most memorable things of our discussion tonight. Was like talking about intersectionalities and then processing space.
What I was gonna say, it's not really a bullet point. It's more of like a takeaway that I personally took away from this is like, I guess this is something that maybe seems a bit obvious, but it's something that I constantly work on, is like just being able to see people without prejudice, like just being able to view people and not like assume in your mind, like assume someone's gender, assume someone's sexuality, assume someone's identity, because it's so easy to do that, you know. And it's partially because I grew up in America. You grew up in a place where there is privilege, there is disparity, there is oppression, and so you naturally like do that. So it's not necessarily that I can't prevent my past from happening, but I should work on it, because even now, like it's so easy to like immediately assume, oh, this person is effeminate or something, like in the back of your mind, or like, oh, this person is very masculine, and it's like you don't know that, you know, you've never even interacted with this person before. Why are you making these conclusions? So I mean, that's something that like has always been in my mind, and I'm always trying to actively work towards not doing. But I think this discussion kind of like reiterated that in my brain as like a reminder, like, hey, you know, everyone is different. Everyone has their own unique identity. Just because something appears a certain way, or just because someone, you know, presents himself a certain way, does not mean anything. So it's just like trying to like grapple with that.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, Sam, you were talking about like, you know, like don't assume people's gender, like stuff like that. And I thought of like pronouns, like coming to college, like we always are like, please say your name, your pronouns, your major, like all of that. And like it never really occurred to me until like recently, like why we do pronouns. It's literally so we don't create those like assumptions and prejudices like in advance. And it's like, it's literally like, it doesn't really do anything for me as a like cisgender heterosexual woman, but like for someone who doesn't identify the way that I do, like it does them so much justice, because you're like allowing them the space to like express their identity, like who they are, you know. Use your pronouns, y'all.
Yeah, and just to kind of try to tie some intersectionality into like pronouns and APIDA. I know people who use like she, her, new pronouns. New would be spelled as NWS, and that's I think it means like a she in Hmong. And I think that one of our podcasts, like for Ask Avo, like actually like has that pronoun. And I'm referencing her. Oh, and Lily too. I forgot. Lily has that pronoun. But yeah, I think like a lot of people are trying to like decolonize themselves and try to put some of their culture within their pronouns. That's also why I like choose to use he they pronouns, because I personally still very much identify as a cisgendered man, but I think like because of where I grew up, we never like within our language we never have he or she, and so I always thought it was kind of weird. Like whenever I try to speak English, I still mix up like he and she, and it's just unconsciously. And so I personally make it a choice to reclaim like part of my culture, I guess, and then be okay with using they pronouns. But yeah.
I really like the incorporation of culture in that too. That was good. Any other lasting thoughts? Going once,
Okay.
going twice.
I know like okay, I'm so sorry. I know like the cutoff time is 11, but this is like you can make the answer as short as you want. But how do y'all define femininity? Kind of like knowing what we know.
I guess for me, the easier answer is to like define like masculinity, and it's like what you hear like adults tell kids like don't cry, don't show emotions like that. So then I think of the opposite for femininity, if that makes sense, is like being very expressive of their emotions, crying if they want to. I guess like also like the social, like wearing a dress, wearing makeup, stuff like that, you know?
Going off of what you said, it's kind of hard for me to define that because I think I identify as a male, but I always consider myself to be more feminine than masculine, and I think it's hard to say this, but I feel like femininity is, uh, in my mind, is being able to express yourself more, and I think masculinity is not expressing yourself as much, and it seems very. It seems like the two should be like opposite sides of a coin, but I think really it's femininity is just self-expression, free self-expression, and then masculinity is not. That's just my take on it. I don't want to like impose that on other people, but
Yeah, for sure. I think like for me, I don't quite, since I never grow up uh like women presenting in a woman presenting way, I only ever grew up with the definition of masculinity, and it used to be like oh, we gotta be like rough or like I don't know, express less emotion. But I the way I define it now is like masculinity is about like choice. Like I personally quote unquote express masculinely but also femininely, like it's just they're both me. So I think of it as like a choice. Like masculinity represents choice for me. It's the choice to express however you want, which is a little bit opposite from what both of y'all said. um, but or I don't know, at least that's like a thing that I try to change for myself at least. But yeah, and I think that's all I have. I was just curious to see what's y'all's definition.